Welcome to Ohio Roots, the official podcast of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey through Ohio's rich genealogy, history, and abundant resources. Hosted by me, OGS Executive Director Noel Poirier, this podcast brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests, from OGS members, chapter leaders, and staff to renowned genealogists, historians, and influential figures within the genealogical community. Each episode delves into fascinating topics and captivating stories. So grab your headphones, hit that play button, and join us on this enthralling journey of Ohio's roots. My guest on today's episode of the Ohio Roots podcast is Shenley Puterbaugh of the website www.inspirefamilyhistory.com. Shenley recently did a webinar for the OGS on just this subject, and I found it just fascinating. And some of the great ideas she presented in that webinar were really wonderful for us to all kind of take back and put in our toolbox. So I really wanted to get out and speak to Shenley a little bit more about what she does and how she goes about trying to inspire herself and others to pursue family history and genealogy. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Shenley. Well, Shenley, thanks for joining us today on the Ohio Roots podcast. I really appreciate it. As we were discussing before we went live here, you just recently gave a webinar for OGS on inspiring young people particularly, but we'll talk more about inspiration, in general as we go along in our conversation. So thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. The first question I ask everybody, and because I've watched some of your webinars, I think I know the answer, but many of our listeners have not. How did you personally get inspired to do genealogy and go down the path of family history and uncovering all your family history?
Yes. Well, my mother, when I was younger, she would tell me stories about herself. Whenever she'd ask if I wanted to hear a story, I'd say, yeah, I want it, but about you when you were little like me, And so I just connected with her in that way by hearing her life stories. And then school assignments, I was assigned to do a family tree, love doing a family tree. So I kind of started getting interested in it. And then when I was 18 and about to graduate high school, I was planning on going on a trip to Europe with a friend, and she backed out, and I didn't know what to do instead. And the thought just came to me to go visit my grandparents. And I know for some people that would sound like, oh, that's not as fun as going to Europe. But I just felt excited about it. And I had never spent one-on-one time with them.
Sure.
And so I spent a week with each set of my grandparents. And it was just incredible. I asked them questions. I interviewed them. We went through old boxes, visited cemeteries of our ancestors, visited old homes and churches and schools, and just I got a family history tour by my grandparents of where our ancestors grew up, because luckily both sets of grandparents lived in the areas where their parents, grandparents, great grandparents had been. And so it was pretty significant. And I came home with about 1,000 names to add to my family tree, which was really exciting. It was really, really cool.
So you came in with all those names, but then the work started, right?
Yes. It was a lot of work just adding them in. I mean, it was just neat because my grandpa specifically, my paternal grandfather, said, when my dad said I was wanting to come, he's like, why is she wanting to come? He was like a little skeptical because I didn't know him super well.
You needed money, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, but then afterwards we had a really great relationship, and I was able to call him. We talked probably every other month for the rest of his life. And we had a relationship that we never had before that. So it was really a great thing. And he actually ended up asking me to help him find information about his grandpa and great grandpa that he didn't know. And so it just was a really neat segue into strengthening relationships and learning more.
It's interesting. Psychologists say the best way to get, information from people is to make them talk about themselves. And I guess genealogists take advantage of that quite a bit on a regular basis. Now you have a website called inspiringfamilyhistory.com, which leads me kind of into my next question. Some genealogists go into DNA, some genealogists go into, different facets of the field. you obviously have decided that your responsibility, your role in the field is to be inspiring to other people and encourage other people to pursue their family history. What made you decide that that was kind of your mission or your calling?
Well, that's a good question. When I came back from my family history trip,
Hmm.
and since then, I have found that, when I'm excited about a family history find, that it's hard to share that excitement with other people
Hmm.
because you're all excited about it and you tell them about it and they're like,
Right.
oh, cool, and it's kind of dead,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of us as genealogists, family historians, experience that, whether it's with
Sure.
our spouses or our parents or children or whatever.
Right.
And it's just it's nice to have that excitement shared, but also
Yeah.
there's just so many benefits from doing family history that we can experience, that our family members can experience. And
Right.
I've seen those benefits in my life, and I've seen
Sure.
those in the life of those that are doing family history. And I just want as many people to experience those
Right.
benefits as possible. And yeah, so inspirefamilyhistory.com has, like, my goal is to help other people have the tools to inspire their loved
Right.
ones or get inspired themselves
Sure. Sure.
to be interested and to love family history.
Yeah. I know from my own personal genealogy experience, my background is in history, not in genealogy.
Mhm.
And so for me, the benefit I enjoy from it is being able to put my ancestors in the proper context of the time in which they lived. And I know that's
Yes.
what I try to pass on to my children as they were going through school, was when they were studying a certain historical era, I could pinpoint the ancestor that they were related to and how they lived and where they lived and how they might have gone through that. So, and that's just one benefit to me. I know you outline a whole bunch of them on your website and some of your webinars, but to me, that was just such a great way for me to connect my kids to the historical event, as opposed to just
Yes.
having it be some abstract thing that only wealthy white men did back in the 1800s or something.
Right, exactly. And even with history, there's so many lessons to learn
Hmm.
with world history or local
Right.
history. And we learn how important it is to learn history so it doesn't repeat itself.
Right.
But how much more significant is it to learn personalized family history? And there's challenges our ancestors have faced.
Mhm.
There's things that get passed down that we wish we could change, and
Right.
or that are amazing and inspiring. And it's just, there's so much we can learn from our family history as well, in addition to the
Right.
history of the world.
I know your point about local history is really great, because I think a lot of folks who grew up in most people who grew up without a history or genealogy background will live in a community not understanding its role and its history as it relates to some of those bigger historical events and
Mhm.
traumas. And so by understanding your family in that area, you certainly get a greater appreciation for where you're actually living, as opposed to
Yeah,
just having an abstract view of it, I guess.
yeah. And then down to why you are the way you are, or why your
Yeah,
parents
that could
acted
be
the
good
way
or
they
bad.
did,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I don't know if I need to know all of that.
Well, well, it was interesting when I was visiting my grandparents. I
Yeah.
felt like after high school, I came away feeling like, wow, I understand my parents so much more
Sure.
now.
Sure.
Little things that I didn't even think about. I was like, oh, that's
Mhm.
why, or
Yeah.
that's where that came from. And in turn, it's helped me to understand myself and be like, yeah, just understand why I am, or why I have quirks or
Yeah.
whatever.
There's got to be a psychologist out there getting their PhD somehow in genealogical psychology.
Oh, yes,
If it
there.
doesn't already exist, somebody will have to get back to me on that, I guess. Now the website, inspirefamilyhistory.com, when did you start that exactly?
That started in 2020.
Okay. So kind of at
Yeah.
the height of COVID?
Yeah, I actually I had originally written a book,
Okay.
and about inspiring family history.
Hmm.
And I had submitted it to a few different publishers, and the feedback
Okay.
was, you don't have a following.
Okay.
Who's going to buy your book? And
All
so
right.
my husband and I were talking about it, and we're like, he just said to me, why don't you just put it on a website?
Sure.
And so I thought about it, and I was like, that's a great idea, you know? And
Yeah.
so I just put it on a website, and I haven't even pursued the book thing since then.
Yeah.
Because this is the way it has developed and the
Sure.
life it took on. And a lot of what I've written is on the website, and I
Okay.
continue to add more.
Okay.
But
Is it,
yeah.
is it, what kind of, like, if I'm going to the website and thinking about ideas of inspiring not just children, but my adult siblings, or
Yeah.
or even maybe even grandparents, what kind of tools and techniques and methodologies will folks find on your website?
Well, they will find lots of ideas. I have a whole ideas page with categories, and they can find creative family history ideas, um, just activities that can get people interested. Um, I feel like most people need to have an experience with family history
Mm-hmm.
to actually start to appreciate it and want to do it more. And so the ideas are experiences that that we can help our family members to have, or that we can do ourselves if we're struggling with being excited about family history. There's also the website also talks about the 3 keys that I shared on the webinar. Finding the right activity for a family member or anyone to help them be inspired. There are resources, so different products that I found that you can use to help inspire family history. There are also articles that I've written, and different article. There's another page with articles that I've just found in the news, or different studies that have been posted about why family history is important and the benefits that we can experience.
Unlock the mysteries of your ancestry with the Ohio Genealogical Society at www.ogs.org. Dive deep into your family's past and connect with fellow enthusiasts. Join us now for exclusive access to expert insights, resources, and a vibrant community. Visit www.ogs.org and start your genealogical journey today. If you enjoy listening to the Ohio Roots podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could go to whatever platform it is that you listen and give us a good review. Reviews help us get more listeners and reach more people with Ohio Roots and what we're trying to do with the Ohio Genealogical Society. So please leave us a nice review, and thanks for listening. Yeah, I mentioned my background in history. What kind of background did you bring into this whole process?
That's a good question. I studied international cultural studies.
Okay.
I love traveling. I love people, different cultures and peoples of the world. And that's what I studied in college and have a passion for. Right. And so I've found that it's very applicable to family history, because our ancestors come from different cultures, whether it's within the United States or out of the United States, and just understanding that their lives were so different and comparing our life to their life, or judging based off of our personal experiences, is not a good way to do it, because the world was just so different for them. Right. And so I've just found it really helpful as I've learned about my ancestors, learned about stupid decisions they've made or whatever, just trying to have that perspective of like, where were they coming from? What were their cultural influences, etc. So
yeah, I would think that would be a huge help in understanding your family from in the past, just understanding culturally where they come from, and kind of realizing that when they encountered other people, because most of our ancestors came from fairly siloed communities in their home countries, and to come to America, which was such a diverse place, I would imagine that you can't divorce the culture they came from having them being dropped into a community where you have people from all over the world.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Kind of on that, I mean, in the process of doing your own family history, mean, you said you have thousands and thousands of folks in your family tree. What were some of the best discoveries you've made so far?
Oh, that's really good.
I'll limit you to three. At the
Three.
most.
Well, are you thinking like stories or people? I guess that's
Well,
the same thing.
I know, yeah, it's kind of the same thing. I know in my own history, like occasionally I'll stumble across an ancestor and I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that was, I would not have expected that. It's kind of a
Yeah.
surprising thing, or
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I was related to somebody I was related to. And I know we
Yeah.
all have kind of those discoveries. Some of us with bigger
Yeah.
trees have more of them. And so sometimes it's harder to identify an individual one.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if you've had any great finds, basically.
Yes, definitely.
Some
So
aha
I
moments.
had a great 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 grandmother who all I had was her first name.
Okay.
And she lived in England. My grandma hardly remembered her. She remembered seeing her in bed on her deathbed with a long braid in her hair, and that's all I knew about her. And so I wanted so badly to push through this wall, and learn about her and find out more about her. And in that journey, I was looking at censuses and found that there were two boys that lived with her and her husband at one point, and it said brother or brothers-in-law under the relation to the household. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's her last name. Those are her brothers that came to live with her. And so I got her last name, and I found, sorry, I'm trying to decide which direction to take this story.
Okay.
Yes,
anywhere you want.
And I eventually was able to find her mother, and I found out that her mother had been put in an asylum in England.
Okay.
And it was interesting because my grandma knew hardly anything about that side of her family. It was all hush hush. Right. There was a rumor that they were gypsies, and they didn't want that to be known or whatever, but that wasn't true. It just was this ancestor ended up in an asylum when her youngest daughter was 2 years old, and we don't know why. There's no record of why, but it really disrupted the family.
Sure.
And the two boys went to live with their older sister who was married, and the family just broke up. And even as I've done descendancy research and found living relatives, no one knows about their family. And it's just been really interesting to see what tragedy can result in for the posterity of not knowing,
right,
when we don't share the truth, or when we don't share what's happening or decide to cover it up, how that can impact generations.
Yeah, and I think sometimes some people doing research for genealogy are often kind of goal-oriented in that they're trying to document their Revolutionary War historical person, or their Mayflower person, or their Jamestown person. And in the process of that, miss out maybe on stories like that, because they're not part of their focus. Yeah,
for sure. But it was a very powerful experience, and just realizing that that families have big challenges. Even our ancestor had big challenges, and thinking about how that affected my grandma, just not knowing her family. And but one thing that was interesting with the same ancestor, Beatrice, I had no pictures of her. And I shared the idea of a generations picture in the webinar of having having photos of, for example, my daughter and myself, and then my mother and her mother and her mother and her mother. And I was planning on giving my daughter one of these when she turned 12, because that's what I did with my son, and that's what I wanted to do with one of my daughters, because my other ones are too little. But I did not have a picture of Beatrice, and she was the third great grandmother. And literally a month before my daughter turned 12, I connected with a relative, didn't even know how we were related. Well, found out that his grandfather was the son of Beatrice, and he sent me a picture of his parents' wedding, and in the background was Beatrice and her husband. And so I was able to zoom in and have this super blurry picture, but I have
but you have a picture at least. Yeah.
And I was able to add it to the photo for my daughter right before her birthday when I was going to give it to her. So that was really cool timing, you know?
Yeah,
I've been looking for a picture for 12 years, probably.
Yeah. I think those things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
Getting back to kind of inspiring people, you know, one of the challenges I know all genealogists have, and you've had them and I've had them, is those brick walls that you run into periodically. And sometimes those brick walls can be pretty demoralizing and make it difficult for you to bother on anything else. You might get hung up on them. What kind of advice do you have from an inspirational standpoint? And you can give a technical advice as well, but from an inspirational standpoint for people when they're hitting not just maybe one brick wall, but several, to just kind of keep plugging along?
I would say be patient. Mm-hmm. I think that, like, as I've stepped back and just given it time, the doors open. You know, it's something is documented or on the internet that's searchable that wasn't before, or some technology comes out that makes it findable, or, you know, or somebody takes a DNA test that hadn't had a DNA test. Mm-hmm. You know, there's so many things are constantly changing. And so I've just found that those walls eventually break down over time. It just takes time and patience and going to something else for a while and then maybe coming back a few years later. And, but getting through those times, I'd just say, yeah, just focus on other areas, focus on the stories that you do have. And, you know, I know that people are very often focused on the research and finding the research, but as they're finding the research and finding the ancestors, it's important to take the time to learn the stories and to pull the stories out of the documents that are there and share those and make them digestible for their family members.
Right. Do you think that kind of the sheer volume now of resources that are available online have done more to inspire people to do family history? Do you sense that that's a thing? Or are too many people just clicking on leaves and that's their only inspiration?
I think that it's helped a lot. I mean, it's hard to feel stuck, like you were saying, with the brick walls. And I feel like the leaves really open a lot of, you know, it allows us to keep going or to keep finding things when we feel stuck. Mm-hmm. So I feel like those have been really helpful in a lot of ways. Right. But also doing our own research is pretty fun and inspiring too. Right. So I think there's pros and cons to everything, right? Yeah. And just trying to find a balance in your research and yeah,
I know, again, from my own experience, if I can't nail down a specific date, whether it's a marriage date or a birth date, or find that document, sometimes though I will find great stories about an ancestor just in a newspaper article. Mm-hmm. or in something, which to me sometimes, because as a historian and mostly as a storyteller, that's actually more valuable to me in many ways than specifically knowing the date on which he married Martha or whatever.
Yes.
So I find it, you know, kind of on your thing, and that's kind of how I push through my brick walls sometimes, is I just start looking at old newspapers, looking for family members, because it gives me something, it gives me something juicy to kind of cling on to as I try to find that actual document.
Yes.
But, so one last thing, and then I'll let you go. What advice would you give to somebody, no matter what their age, if they're just starting out in genealogy and want to try to figure out how to get started? What bit of advice would you give them?
Back on the stories, I would say focus on the stories. You know, if they're just getting started, you want them to keep the momentum and enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. And as I've talked to people who are getting into family history, I've talked to a lot of teens who are into family history, and they have all said that it starts with a story. Yeah. And for me, it started with stories as well. And I feel like learning those stories and and finding the details
Mhm.
is probably the most engaging part of family history. Finding the newspapers, taking the time and really diving into individuals, and not just focusing on furthering your line, but actually taking time with the people and seeing your ancestors not as names and dates, but as people, and trying to discover who they were.
And if you're looking for receptive ears to tell all your family stories to, you can always come to an OGS chapter meeting, because that goes on a lot at those meetings. Everybody's telling their latest discovery. So that's always fun. Shenley Puterbaugh of InspireFamily.com. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Ohio Roots podcast. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to your next webinar for us. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
That was a great conversation with Shenley Puterbaugh of www.inspirefamilyhistory.com. I think it's great for us to remind ourselves of the ways that we can inspire other people and how we've become inspired to do family history over the years. And Shenley certainly seems to have a knack for laying out plans and methods that really can work for you, whether you're trying to inspire a grandchild, a child, a sibling, a grandparent, a parent, just to get somebody inspired to enjoy family history and pursue it in the same way that we all do. So thank you to Shenley for joining us today on the Ohio Roots podcast, and thank you all for listening.
The Ohio Roots podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Genealogical Society, the premier gateway for discovering your Ohio family history. Hosted by OGS Executive Director Mill Poyer and edited by Luke Poyer. Theme song is Beautiful Ohio, recorded by Bob Stanley and his orchestra in 1944. To learn more about joining the Ohio Genealogical Society, visit www.ogs.org.